Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous security monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service, offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email contact@netsparker.com. LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all of observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Got my cast and co-host here on the show via Skype. And I want to talk politics without really talking politics, because I think it's important for us to discuss the facts without getting necessarily political. So take what your feelings are about the whole situation, which I know is difficult for many of us. And what I've been trying to do, especially lately, is look at the facts. And really, I think when it comes to some of the issues that we're going to talk about with respects to the EFF's stance on certain things and their ad recently that was running in Wired Magazine, you need to separate your feelings and let's look at the facts. And so there are some things that need to be discussed in the light of security and privacy that we talk about on this show that I believe cannot go unaddressed. Now, what's really interesting is this full-page ad, calls out President-elect Trump on a lot of things and all of his appointments and, his cabinet that he's working on building now, calls him out on a lot of things. And those things are undermining digital security, supporting mass surveillance, and threatening net neutrality. Also promises to identify and deport millions of your friends and neighbors, track people based on their religious beliefs, and suppress freedom of the press. I think a lot of that is speculation, to be quite honest, in respects to the facts that I've tried to ascertain from reading what's happening in the media today. I will also say that Wired has written several articles, one in particular which is really concerning to me. They wrote a review of Rogue One, the movie, and they tied it to political events in 2016. And I mean, if there's ever more of a shining example of just being way too hyped up on the politics that have happened in this country in the past year, it is that shining example. I'm like, come on, guys. It's a friggin' Star Wars movie, for crying out loud. Let us either be excited about it or poo-poo it like the diehard Star Wars fans that only recognize 3 Star Wars movies in our entire lives. Talk about that. Don't talk about politics, for crying out loud, in your article about Star Wars. Yeah, more than so with some maybe more than 2, right? If you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you recognize A New Hope and Empire, and that's it. Everything else in your world is crap. Which I see your point there. I see your point. I don't look down upon you if that is your decision with respects to Star Wars. However, on the flip side of that, I'm kind of... Yeah,
it's been a bit facetious. But
even though I'm a Jedi,
I can play into your facetiousness. Yes.
If all you've got is New Hope and Empire,
so let me pick on something specific, and that is net neutrality, which is an issue very near and dear to my heart and all of our hearts here, especially all of us that participate in or run podcasts. That's like a friggin' big deal, right? And the general consensus that you read in the media is that the incoming president and his cabinet and whatever are opposers of the net neutrality. and they're going to work to reverse it.
Somewhat inevitably, I think, because it is in the best interest of many of his, we'll call it corporate partners, to do so, because it will allow them to have the kind of control that they have wanted. And now they have someone in office for whom who is more friendly to the kind of goals that they have.
And I agree, and that concerns me very much, because largely the net neutrality is not a law that was passed by Congress. It is
an FCC policy.
It's an FCC
It's a regulation,
policy.
a policy.
A regulation or policy, which the president can work to change. Correct? Now, write in if I'm not the world's foremost, expert on politics or law, but that's something that could be changed, right? Without having to go back and pass laws or get the House and the Senate to pass a law. Correct?
Am I correct in remembering that they classified ISPs as common carriers? Does anybody remember if that's correct or not?
That's correct.
Okay, so if they classified ISPs as common carriers, as I understand it, not claiming to be an expert, oh dear God, they're not allowed to prefer traffic one over the other.
Correct.
If that's the case, then net neutrality is sort of built into the infrastructure. On the other hand, if they change that, then it goes up for grabs. And I think that's the question. Are they going to change that?
Yeah, I mean, you contrast that with, my other businesses in cigars, obviously, as I'm sitting here smoking a cigar. Something like the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act was a law that was passed through Congress. You can't just reverse that. However, there are ways in which you can change funding, and there's a lot of nuances to that you can affect which areas that affects. But in effect, you can't just come in to be president day one and be like, you know what, that law that was passed, that's completely out. So using that as an example, put that in context with the incoming administration as it pertains to cybersecurity. There are some things that are law that are protected, right, that, yes, through influence and a whole lot of work, can be overturned or changed, but there are things that are falling in that category, and then there are things that fall into, executive orders, swipe of a pen, that can go away. But let's talk about, so net neutrality is one of those things, very concerning to me. Obviously, I don't want to see that change. I want to, whoever has the best content, in my opinion, should win when we talk about this particular situation, and that's my belief on it.
But go back to peering.
Paul.
I'm not, but if I were, that would be my rule, or law, or regulation, or whatever it is, right? However we define it.
Go back to things like peering. I mean, when you have peering arrangements with various carriers, you've got eyeballs and you've got content generators. You've got content generators and you've got content consumers, and they develop sort of an informal, but very, very highly respected traditional way of trading. So that if you were a huge content creator and somebody else was a huge content consumer, you could trade traffic without any problem and no cost to each other. But if you're a huge content creator and somebody else doesn't have that many consumers and they want to send traffic to you, well, you've got to pay me for that privilege.
Right.
So
that's the concern. Yes.
There's ways that net neutrality doesn't actually exist now. To be very honest.
That's very true, depending on whether or not given ISPs and given backbones and such have decided to, whether they've decided to fully upgrade their peering infrastructure. I will note that if you're an aficionado of VPN tunnels, there are certain ways that you can set up your tunnels such that you will bypass one set of peering relationships and essentially hop through a less congested peer to another ISP, and you'll get vastly increased traffic, despite the fact that you're not actually changing the amount of data that's coming from point A to point B.
Well, and it's
you're just changing the mechanism.
It's interesting because we in a large sense pay, right, to get some of that preferred access because we have a podcast hosting provider who also hosts things like the NFL's podcast, and we pay them to host our podcast. Therefore, we're kind of outside of some of these issues. But it's not just self-serving for me. I want to see anyone that has good content get the same level of service that people that may have to pay that have larger volume. So separate volume from interest.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. If you go and look at high-frequency traders, they actually pay to be physically located as close to the clearinghouses as possible because nanoseconds matter to them. Okay? So now you're talking about timing, and they're willing to pay a lot of extra money to be nanoseconds closer. And you want to talk about hack naked? Most of them run entirely naked without any security provisions at all because it slows their trades down by literally nanoseconds.
Right.
I think they're starting to measure in whatever the next unit of time is below that, which is terrifying that they're measuring at that level. So now you've got people that are paying extra for physical location for timing reasons for their trades. And you've got people that are peering and paying money for eyeballs or generation of content for peering. Well, is net neutrality even real? And so I'm playing devil's advocate. Bear with me for a second. But what do you think about that? I mean, when you start talking about that kind of arrangement.
Well, I think there are economic models where, yes, paying will get you better service, for example. But my concern is taking that down to a micro level will hurt the overall economy.
I agree. That was well said, and I can agree.
It comes down to kind of a notion of is the time differential, is the monetary differential something that is a real consequence of the way that these things are set up? Or is this, well, bluntly, just money-grubbing behavior to charge people because you can?
True. Yes, that's a very good distinction, Eric.
Or to add to what you said, which is a good point, is it a push to get another market to move in a certain direction? You know, with the incoming administration, recently we've seen a slew of tweets and sayings that have devalued stock prices and devalued business, right? So could it be a ploy? You know, at the end of the day, rhetoric is rhetoric. It's really what happens when it comes down to action that you can bank on, so to speak.
Yeah, and I don't think obviously we haven't had any real action from the incoming administration yet. It's all speculation, and I think that's largely. I think the EFF is doing a good job of making us aware of what could happen, albeit I think it's very extremely paranoid. And to just kind of further go on to what they're saying, right? They're saying, well, let's encrypt and use HTTPS and end-to-end encryption. Let's scrub our logs. If you get a government request to monitor your users or speech, tell the world, and fight for user rights in courts and beyond. And I think that's all. I think that's good. You know what? I think that's good advice, regardless of the administration that we have in place here in the U.S. I like to think that we have a thing called freedom, which a lot of people don't realize how much that doesn't exist in other countries. On our cigar
you need to understand, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
Yeah. But no, I don't agree. And you know, one of the things that opened my eyes to the whole thing was being in the cigar industry. We very much study and speak to a lot of people who are of Cuban descent and study Cuban culture. And you know, with the passing of Fidel Castro, like a lot of people just don't get it, dude. Like what it means to have freedom and what it means to be in an oppressive government. And what a lot of people don't realize is that even like before Castro, for example, Baptista was the ruler in Cuba, like way worse than Castro, right? As bad as Castro it was and largely still is with his legacy continuing, the previous regime was worse, right? So
that's why so many people hailed him as a hero, and that's why
it's true. It's true. It's very true, Jim.
He was a freedom fighter from Batista. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's like, you know, that's just comparing bad to worse. I don't know if there's
but you have to take into account. You have to take into account the fact that most people would much rather sit at home and catch up on what's going on with the Kardashians than actually pay for tickets and go abroad and it's really understand.
And Scott, you bring up a great point. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion. I think it's important. I think whether you agree or disagree with whatever your feelings are on politics, I think you should listen to what the EFF is saying. I think somewhat it's largely overstated today. You know, evidence for the Trump administration being opposed to net neutrality, I think, is still somewhat weak. They're going on a very nondescript tweet. They're going on a very nondescript document that they point to from the Republican Party that doesn't even mention the phrase net neutrality in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I think a lot of it is we need to wait and see. However, I think the EFF is doing a good job of raising awareness before that happens. There are some indicators that are kind of non-specific, but good job to the EFF to making us all aware and forcing us here on this podcast to talk about it with the security community and making people aware of what could happen and preventing some of these bad things from happening.
So it all comes down to, in my opinion, Paul, it all comes down to First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, right? I mean, this is a constitutional discussion, I think, ultimately.
Absolutely.
And, especially in the security community, I think we've been extremely concerned about both of those. But the Fourth Amendment in particular has been a very large concern of the community.
Ask Paul what the Fourth Amendment is.
Yeah. So, Paul, tell me what the Fourth Amendment is.
The Fourth Amendment is that search and seizure?
Yeah,
Search and seizure.
What is it?
Search and seizure, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
And we should be. EFF is right to put us on notice. We should be protecting, if nothing else, just protecting the Constitution.
And, it's very much in line with what their goals have been for years. And in this particular case, it's mostly just a case of this is the opportune moment to draw attention to these aspects. None of what the EFF's saying is new as far as their policy goes. Correct. They have always been in favor of privacy. They have always been in favor of minimizing the amount of data retained by various organizations. And so if now is the kind of news that gets people to pay attention to these things, it is perfectly right and proper for them to jump onto this bandwagon, as it were, and push their agenda.
I think that they couldn't have summed it up better when they say the future of our democracy depends on an internet that is free from censorship and government surveillance. And like you said, Eric, making us more aware of these issues now is an opportune time, and I think really important as well. But the evidence that we have that is something inevitable is going to happen with a lot of these laws, regulations, government bodies that impose these regulations, nothing that I've read anyway, like that I haven't mentioned already, sends up like huge red flags that this is definitely going to happen, right? It definitely could happen. There are indicators. It's kind of like detecting a breach, right? Like there are some indicators, and we need to be aware, and I agree. But let's not overreact and say that these things are definitely going to happen.
To mangle metaphors somewhat, it's a configuration that allows for a bad state to happen. Mm-hmm. And if you want to make sure that the bad state doesn't happen, right, you have to change the configuration.
Yep. Well, I also think too, in my estimation, and largely this relates to my business in cigars, right, which has come under scrutiny from the FDA to become regulated. I think that there are a lot of negative effects that could happen from that. And let's draw some parallels that we've talked about on previous shows too, with respects to these types of regulations, that we don't want them to hinder or raise the bar as your barrier to entry into market and destroy the free market. And largely, we've been consumers of this great free market in security. We can start up a startup. We can create this great software. That has to be preserved. In other industries, regulation threatens to destroy that, and we need to be aware of that in security as well. Let's not forget the things that happened in Germany where they tried to regulate and destroy hacking tools as well. Let's keep that in mind.
Let's say I'm going to do my best Jack Daniel and try to make all sorts of groans and sound, but I think you're making.
But you're too young.
Well, thank you. I think you're making some gross overreaches there, Paul. Just going back a little bit, I don't think we have yet gotten our heads around the fact that so much is happening based on the president-elect tweeted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is somewhat of a concern, that so many things can happen because of that. That seems.
I mean, it's already been pointed out that companies have been he's been calling companies to task, and their stock prices have been impacted all over the power of a tweet. I don't get the impression, and I could be completely wrong, that this new administration coming in, that net neutrality, anything having to do with the internet and networking and all this stuff that we care so passionately about, is high on their agenda list to begin with, other than Trump's ability to tweet.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're right, Chip. No, I think that's a great point.
Paul and guys, who created the software that we can then upload into our brains to allow us to decipher what a text really says, or what a string of letters on a computer screen without the facial gestures, without the hands, without the tone, without the inflection?
Oh, we have emoticons now. We don't need.
Oh, yes, emoticons. We're going to save the world. No, you're right. But who really can decipher what is rhetoric and what is not? You look at what the EFF is.
Good point.
Right. You look at what the EFF is saying. Let's take a step back in history. Paul, I don't know if you're old enough for this one. I know I'm not. Howard Stern. Walk with me for a second. Howard Stern, who came up, he was known as the shock jock. Why? Right? Because he said outlandish things. Right?
Like Paul?
What did that do? Yeah, like Paul. But what did that do?
Got the attention of the FCC.
It got the name Howard Stern in everybody's mind. Right? Springboard forward, if you will, and look at what Trump's done. Look at what he's done. I'm dead serious. Every single thing that he said,
the shock president.
Yes.
Well,
that's it exactly.
It's trolling for profit.
Right.
Yes.
And so why can't we make the argument, and the EFF can hate me all they want for this one, but why can't we make the argument that the EFF is doing the same thing based off of trying to infer what is being tweeted? Why can't we say that the EFF is doing its best job and its credo to get security for the internet out in the forefront of every single person's mind by saying, hey, the sky is falling, net neutrality, sky is falling, watch out, here's what you need to do, sky is falling. I mean, you're basing this off of rhetoric from somebody who we have seen time after time after time after time say things to keep their name in the front of your head, so when you go to the poll, you see his name, you say, oh, I like that guy, click. You're
basically saying we're reacting to secondary and tertiary rhetoric.
Yeah, so I see one fundamental flaw in that argument.
Mm-hmm.
He's already been elected. So,
Well, yeah. But if you look at his history, though, it's not like this is a new thing for him. He's been doing this at least since the 80s that I happen to recall. Yeah. And I'm not old enough to remember back much further.
So the end of my sentence was going to be,
it's interesting.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
And we will see exactly what happens with respect to legislation
and there have already been
actions that occur once the office starts rolling.
And I will grant you that he hasn't taken exception. He can't have taken because he's not in office yet. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't take and make preparations, take mitigative actions to ensure that should these worst case situations arise, that we're at least prepared to address them.
Yeah, and that I think is exactly what the EFF is doing.
And I think Eric summed that up nicely, so that we can move on to the next story. Yeah, I couldn't put it any better myself. Nicely done, Eric. Let's talk about Huawei buying a security vendor, which is kind of interesting. Huawei has come under scrutiny for a lot of security-related news stories over the years. Now they're poised to buy Hexxit, which is a 40-person, $4.5 million in funding company that provides database security. Some of you may remember them as Green SQL, who I thought made a fantastic product. And now Hexxit is going to be bought by potentially Huawei, and the final deal is expected to go through soon. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, what better way to get your binaries whitelisted?
Oh,
Wow. Oh, nice.
Wow.
Well, if that was the case, Eric, they would have bought an endpoint security company, but they didn't. They bought a database security company. So it gives me somewhat hope that they're on the up and up in this particular scenario. However, they're buying a somewhat, in terms of security companies go, 40 people in just taking a $4.5 million round. In my estimation in the security market, that's a pretty small company. It's a pretty small buy for a large company like Huawei.
it depends on how influential and significant their technology is. As you said, it was a pretty good product, and we all know how complimentary you are to products. So it was probably pretty damn good. So if they've got some pretty impressive technology, and do you remember what databases their technology worked on?
It was MySQL. I want to say they supported Postgres, and they probably have expanded since then. So I'm not exactly sure. I haven't.
You heard it
Anything
here first.
for Oracle?
I have not. I don't. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember. I have to go back through my Enterprise Security Weekly notes with that.
Because if they are that influential on MySQL and Postgres, which are, as we know, pretty significant on web apps, they might be using it as sort of that foot in the door to get security in. Hell, I mean, it might refer back to our previous story. They might be trying to use it to get in there so that they can do preferential treatment on various applications across their phones and across their whatevers. I don't know.
What does Huawei need databases for?
That was my question too. It looks like Hexxit is now also moved into the cloud. So they have Hexxit for AWS, SQL Azure, Google Cloud, and Rackspace.
That's an interesting cross-section.
Mm.
They just unveiled the
why
Cloud
does
Sandbox
anybody have a
Inspection
database?
Service.
It's
They just-
interesting.
They just unveiled the Cloud Sandbox Inspection Service to improve APT defense timeliness. So they're trying to do APT defense. They're going to take their new next-gen firewall, intrusion prevention, database security, and they're trying to be a full-stack protection system.
Yeah, so supported databases, MySQL, SQL Azure, SQL Server, MiraDB, and Amazon Aurora. So
They're buying
moved
up
to
all
the
the
cloud.
security technologies that we're all familiar with, whether they needed it or not, so they can say they got it covered. So they're
Well, that
Yeah.
and any key to making money in any business, no matter what business you're in.
right.
Whether they need it or not, so they can say they got it covered.
Yeah, the key to
Whoa, that's a serious delay in echo. Someone's got an echo going on all of a sudden.
Appropriate for Amazon.
Yeah. Oh boy.
The key to any business, which is what I was saying, the key to any business is diversification of your product line, right? The more products you have, the more that you can sell, the more that you can put your business out there. So for them to swallow up, all of these different technologies, it makes complete sense when you look at how their business is moving and what their business is moving into and what verticals they're trying to go after.
Another story that came across my desk further. So, the trends that I've seen recently with the Mirai botnet and all of this talk about IoT devices and home routers are trends that greatly concern me. I've seen botnets that are cross-compiling malware for lots of different platforms. I've seen malware that not only replaces the firmware or backdoors the firmware in your home routers, but makes it so that they fix the vulnerability they used to get in. It makes it impossible for you to upgrade the firmware of that router. I've also seen now the tried and true technique where they're through malvertising campaigns, so they embed inside of an image some code that changes your DNS servers of your home router, that redirect your DNS servers. I mean, I saw these attacks way back in 2005, and now they're like the new shiny hotness for building your botnet and for basically malvertising to make money. And these are trends that greatly concern me. It's ones that, 10 or 11 years ago, I researched and was like, wow, that was really bad if attackers started doing that at scale. Now they're doing it at scale. How do you guys feel about that, and what are some potential recommendations or assessment of this particular threat?
Well, part of it is...
Good.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
All right. So part of it is there's going to be a little issue with respect to consumer equipment. Consumers, by and large, get whatever's cheapest for what they need it to do, and they don't necessarily have on tap the kind of knowledge and experience that folks like us have to help keep them safe.
And how is that different, Eric, from most of the small companies you deal with?
Well, the small companies that I deal with generally have at least a little budget to get something in there. But by and large, as well, the small companies at least have a toe in the corporate water type thing, so they can get hold of something better than a trash a ISP-provided gateway. They can get hold of something that actually resembles a router. And accordingly, they have the ability to take certain measures, blocking outbound DNS except from specific assets and only to specific other places, and otherwise exert control over these kinds of infrastructural concerns. Whereas your basic consumer doesn't have the ability in their equipment to do any of that.
But now you're talking about putting enterprise-grade security and system administration down to the consumer. Mm-hmm. And it's fine if you build that into the box. But, while I have great admiration for companies like Netgear and other companies that build those consumer-grade boxes, they have to get it out the door fast.
It's a price point thing. It's a price point thing. You can't do enterprise-grade security for a $50 box.
Yeah, fast and cheap does not equal enterprise security.
Yeah, that's, they call that Truman's Triangle: good, fast, cheap.
Yep.
You just can't. You can't. Got to pick one. Now, arguably, with increased publicity, there might be an emerging market there that could be examined, explored, but I think it's going to take a lot more things to break first before the market really takes off, and I think we'll see people trying to fill that void once the publicity gets bad enough.
And Joff, I largely I agree. I think the surveys and some of the market data that I've seen from this year has spoken to the fact that consumers are increasingly making their purchasing decisions based more and more on security and privacy than ever before. It's not the primary driver. However, they are reluctant to adopt new technology because of security and privacy concerns. And I think that, Ed Scotus was scheduled to be on this show to talk about this topic, but Ed came on a number of episodes ago and said, this voice thing is great. And if that enables people to adopt this technology, that's great. But they still have this stigma where they're like, I really don't want my refrigerator to be connected, or I don't want this voice activation because I'm concerned that someone could be listening, or I'm concerned that my data could leak and there could be security issues. And studies that I've watched this year have proven that and said, consumers really aren't adopting this new technology because of some of these security and privacy issues.
Yeah, but I think that's
Alexa, are you listening? Alexa?
No, don't say that. Don't. No.
I think that's a positive trend. It's whether people can make the connection between that and their home networking gear. That's a bit of a journey to take, right? But that's what we would, if you were being a smart marketer in this environment right now, you would start gearing up to say, hey, I've got your home box. It's going to cost $120, but it's going to have a built-in, $120. I picked an arbitrary number, okay? But it's going to have a built-in security mechanism that's cloud connected. Everybody drink, and will attempt to give you appropriate DNS filtering, appropriate levels of security that you can actually configure by going to our portal, blah, 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 and so forth. But, I think it's going to take just a lot more awareness before people get to the place where they really want that as a market. And there's still going to be a very large portion of the consumer population that's going to say, just give me the $50 box. I just want to get online.
Well, it comes down to features, too. I want, and again, it goes back to that triangle, right? I want something that's good. I want it to be secure, and I want it to be reasonably cheap. And that magic
That's not the average consumer, though, Paul. That's not even the average company. I want it to work, and I want it to be cheap, and I want it to do whatever it has to do to make compliance go away.
And I want it now.
Yeah, I don't want to be in a waiting list. I don't want to fund a Kickstarter to get it.
I'm an emerging market, a little bit of what we're talking about, because if you think about it, we're talking about it from an older viewpoint. We're saying, let's protect the perimeter. Let's watch the DNS queries. Let's do this. Let's do that. When in fact, people are decentralizing their own lives. How many devices does anybody on this program right now have with multiple SIM cards in multiple devices? How many people bought a tablet with its own SIM card? It's got 4G, 5 gigs of data a month, and your phone has 5 gigs or 10 gigs or whatever a month, and you've got a laptop. They have laptops with SIM cards in them, and your MiFi, and you're this and you're that. And we're getting more and more to where your car, of course, these days.
And not only that, Josh, but how many devices do you have today that report back up to the cloud as well? Right? I mean, that's another kind of access point for attackers.
I have sleep apnea. I wear a BiPAP at night. My BiPAP has a SIM card in it to report how often I'm wearing it to the insurance company. Seriously.
Well, that's not weird at all.
Yeah, well, the insurance company thing is something we've talked about this year at length as well, right? And it started with car insurance. I can plug this thing into my OBD2 port, and it reports back to my car insurance how well I've been driving, right? And then I think largely the public is skeptical of that. But then you put that down to your refrigerator and all these other devices, and then people become more and more skeptical. So I think we underestimate how much skepticism there is out there in the consumer market about this technology.
If we were being smart in the security space, we would start talking about the right for people to have ownership of their own personal data.
That is the thing
that's a thing.
EFF and others have gone after many times. I think they like calling it the right of repair, if nothing else.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like I want like myself and my immediate family to be the only ones that know how long I'm in the bathroom going poop.
No.
But I can buy a toilet. I can buy a toilet seat that's going to tell someone exactly how long I'm in there.
Well, Paul, did you see the article that just recently came out about insurance companies tracking the mileage on your vehicle and how they did it? Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that recent article.
So they were saying that it's a couple of ways, either through self-reporting, right? When you go to get an oil change, like, Valvoline, right? Or some other third party getting your information and then selling it back to the insurance company. So now the insurance company can say, on this date he had this much mileage, on this date he had this much mileage, right? And go back to you and say, okay, well, your insurance only covered you for a certain amount of period. Why are you lying on your application? And then drop you like a rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and by the way, Paul, I just want to go back to you in the bathroom. If you'd stop Facebooking about it, we wouldn't know, okay?
Well, that's true. This is true. Mostly, anytime you see a tweet from me, I'm probably in the bathroom.
So Scott's bringing up
IoT. Well, I just want to finish. Want to finish it real quick, and then I'm getting out of this subject altogether. The fun thing with the IoT stuff is that we are currently watching a brand new market come online, and whether we're at the height of that market or at the beginning of the market, or maybe even the end, we don't know. It's up to us as security people to help guide and navigate how that market comes together. We're going to see the prevalence of connectedness more and more, and pretty soon there will be devices that can not only see which vehicle is talking to what access point, but also be able to watch the conversation from the vehicle itself. So if you have a Bluetooth phone on your vehicle is transmitting, you should be able to see that.
And Scott, to your point, I think we're on the beginning stage of that technology, because I think there was a time before electricity was in every home. There was a time before modern plumbing was in every home. I think we're approaching the point where all of my appliances and things in my house are connected, right? I think you're going to approach the point where you buy a house and logically every toilet, every refrigerator, every washer and dryer, all of your lights and locks and everything is all just connected in your home. So I think we're on the beginning cusp of it, and I think security is going to play a huge role in the development of all these technologies. And we can either keep up or we can fall way behind. And I think the inevitable case is that we're going to go buy a home someday, and all of this stuff is just going to be connected to each other.
Let's face it. You want the toilet
standard
seat that can tell you how much you weighed when you sat down versus when you got up.
I want the toilet seat that does the air drying, the heated seat,
or it could just weigh the dump.
I want the whole smart toilet. I want everything to be. I want it when I approach the toilet, the seat goes up. When I sit down, the seat is already heated. And then after I go, I want the spray of warm water to wash me. I want the hot air to dry me. And then I want the special bowl that takes care of all the antibacterial stuff and washes it away. And then, I don't know. It sends to Twitter. It sends to Twitter how many times I went or something like that. I want it all.
See,
I want it all.
I'm admittedly paranoid, and my personal thought is that if I have to go into a house and perform an exorcism before I feel safe being there, that's not necessarily going to be a good thing.
That's true.
I mean, to be brutally honest here, all of these data exfiltrations from cars and such like are not for your benefit. They are for the benefit of whatever insurance company or whatever is trying to make money off of you to help them make more money off of you.
It is like the TV show Continuum.
I personally have objections to that.
It's like the TV show Continuum, where she gets propelled into the future and the corporations have taken over. That is one potential future. Let's not let that happen.
St. Paul Security Weekly is broadcast in Times Square.
That's right.
which kinds of means at this juncture of the evolution, there's a reasonable argument for being a total Luddite and going with a tinfoil hat.
Let's go off grid. Yes.
And going off grid and not implementing any of these technologies yet because the issues have not been worked out, and we have really a massive privacy concern more than anything else. And then we have a massive security concern. We have an opportunity as a security community on that security side for sure, if we engage with these vendors. But the privacy issues are just an enormous space that needs a lot of.
In the interest of time, and just speaking to the privacy issue, Joff and I both had a story about PGP and giving up on PGP. And Joff, I really want your take on this story.
Well, before we do that, let me.
All right, Jeff, 1 point, then we're going to talk about PGP.
2 points, and I want to talk about
and then we're going to talk about PGP.
So, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
To what Scott said, the security community has a responsibility in terms of all this stuff that we're talking about. But I would love to see, and I know there's people that are committed to let's get it right and let's protect everybody's privacy. I would love to see that be separated from my perception very often that companies in the security community are just trying to latch onto the IoT as it's another way to market, it's another way to sell. What can we do to stir up the paranoia? My other comment is in terms of privacy, and this is, what's the difference between security and privacy? We're talking about insurance companies getting an accurate reading of your mileage on your car. Our insurance rates are based on, we tell them how many miles we're going to drive in a week on average. What's your commute to work or whatever. In theory, the insurance rates are based on everybody pitching in their fair share, and you get a kickback if there's not a payout. it's
Socialism.
there's a difference between the insurance for profit and the insurance for the socialistic. We're all paying into a system and it's going to work, and we understand some of us are going to pay and others are going to benefit. But there's something to be said for if the insurance companies are getting a reading off your car that's markedly different from what you were self-reporting, what degree of privacy is simply truing up, making you honest?
Yeah, no, I think fraud detection and prevention is an area where corporations can win, and I think largely us as the consumers can win if companies can help protect fraud. I think that's where a lot of threat intelligence is really good, in the fact that it helps companies prevent fraud. And I think Jeff brings up a great point. Okay.
All right. Let's talk PGP.
PGP. Joff, what did you think of this article? I'm really curious your take on this one.
So you might have noticed that Paul and I posted 2 articles, I think. Yours was why I'm not giving up on PGP, the op-ed. And mine was the other op-ed that said, I'm giving up on PGP.
Yeah, it was the point and counterpoint, correct.
The yin and the yang.
So the one I posted, look, I use PGP, and I like the technology at its core, but the biggest pain in the neck is the fact that key management is not a problem that has been solved. And key management is a really, really difficult thing. And people will say, "Oh, no worries. I'm going to." Yeah, look at Jeff. I'm going to.
Jeff is he's fired up.
Yeah, I am going to. I'm going to publish my key on the plain text HTTP MIT key repository server. Right.
Oops.
Thank you, MIT. Yeah, that's great until you rotate your key, and then everybody in your contact list is screwed. And for the handful of encrypted emails that you try to send every year, or even more than a handful if you're in the security community, I send all kinds of stuff. But it's key management is a problem that is not solved. It's very, very painful. It's very difficult. And more to the point, I think a lot of Jeff's now holding up degrees, cryptanalyst. Thank you. We know Jeff. We know, man. You're it. And more to the point, the integration. Zimmerman and everybody's done a great job with promoting the idea that PGP is awesome, but the integration across the different platforms has just frankly been a 2-bit effort and it's just not succeeded.
Well, Jeff, and Jeff, I'm going to give you a chance to speak, I promise. One of the things that I thought was interesting from the article was the notion that forward secrecy isn't always desirable. In other words, that when I establish a key relationship and I encrypt emails for years, that all those emails are from the past 5 years are encrypted with that one key.
And stored, right?
And stored encrypted with that key, making that key more valuable over time and more of a single point of failure issue over time. And that was one of the issues that until I read this article, I never really thought about in that light. That if I'm using the same key for that long, that's kind of concerning. So Jeff, I want to turn it over to you because I know this issue's got you all.
He's holding up his certificate.
Holding up your face. Yeah.
So many years ago, a gentleman named Bruce Schneier wrote the book supposedly called what was it called?
Applied Cryptography.
Applied Cryptography. I got it on my bookshelf right here.
I have my copy. Is it here? It's not here, but it is signed by Bruce as well.
And his book, I'm going to paraphrase, said, this security thing's simple. All you got to do is encrypt everything and we'll be done. And I remember reading that book saying, wow, this guy's a moron. And to his credit, he wrote a later book. What was it called? I've got it on my shelf too. What's it called? Ciphers and Lies, or
Secrets and
something like
Lies.
that?
Secrets and Lies.
Mm-hmm. Where he said, when I wrote that first book, Applied Cryptography, I was kind of young and naive, and I didn't realize there was more to it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, he gets it now. Encryption does not. It's not a magic cure. It's almost like how most people view the hacker community. It's magical and everybody's waving around rubber chickens and there's all sorts of stuff going on that we don't know about. Cryptography and encryption has its place and it has its limitations. It was really, really, really hard to do in the DoD and the government. And I've always been suspect of attempts at doing it in the commercial realm. Going back to PCI, one of the gimmicks, or I shouldn't say gimmick. One of the trends today is to encrypt the credit card number, and if it's done a certain way, then you don't have to do PCI because it's encrypted, so it's not credit card data anymore. There's. I think there needs to be more education about the limitations and pluses and the minuses of encryption. And as Joff accurately pointed out, the hardest element of encryption is key management, because sooner or later, if you're going to bother to encrypt something, you're going to want to decrypt it. Otherwise, you don't need to keep it. And, so the attack points don't become intercepting the encrypted traffic and trying to go through all sorts of cryptanalysis to try to break the code, which is possible. But usually the easier thing is to either find where it's being encrypted or decrypted and then attack those endpoints, or simply steal the damn key.
So I'm going to remind everybody of the XKCD, where they said, hey, here's your $5 wrench. Go beat the guy until he gives you the key.
Exactly.
The other point is that I actually was involved on a discussion on a cryptography mailing list about photographers want encryption. And I'm like, encryption isn't magic. Encryption is a tool in a toolbox. What's the use case? What do they actually want to do with it? And I got yelled at for asking that question. And it was like, no, they have a use case. They want things to do or functions. What do they want? And then we can determine if it's just a hash that they need, so that you can determine if it's been tampered with. Maybe they just want to make sure that their stuff gets off the camera fast. Because encryption isn't going to help if you burn, smash, and destroy the SD card in the camera. It's not magically reconstructible or whatever. Okay, maybe you just need a good internet connection, those SIM cards and the cameras we were talking about earlier, to get the data off. Encryption is just a tool. Plus, by the way, last quick thing, NIST is actually just put out a request for people to start discussing. I'm sorry?
You just stole my thunder, but go ahead.
I'm sorry. If you want to, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I was going to say, it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, though. It's still a useful tool. And as was just about to be said, NIST just put out a CFP to the public for proposals for new cryptography standards in a post-quantum computing world, which I believe was just about to be said, which is, it's always needed to go stronger. If we need to go stronger, the same old problems have not been solved, as Jeff very eloquently pointed out. And it is still just a tool that can be subverted in various ways.
And speaking to NIST, they also just put out a lovely publication on engineering security into things. And they defined an asset in this as essentially something of value. And going into key management, keys are a thing of value. So this is all that lovely, horrible systems administration homework that nobody actually wants to do because it's boring, tedious, and awful.
It's amazing when you get down to it how much the fundamentals matter. It's really that simple.
And the fundamentals in largely mean like work, and like a lot of work, and people don't want to go. They just want like the tool or the product or the solution that just solves the problem. And if we get a bunch of those, we're in good shape. And what people don't understand, not to be like prolific about our message on security, but like the security is a lot of work.
That's
security is a
when
lot of
you
work.
sell.
It's a tool. Crypto is a tool in the right hands, right? In the wrong hands, and again, who we deem right and wrong is all based on societal norms. It's a different discussion. In the wrong hands, it could be a hindrance. In the hands of people who don't know what they're doing. Oh boy.
It's like that. It's like that analogy I give in one of my talks that I just started giving. It's like that 3-section staff, right? Have you guys ever seen a 3-section staff? It's like nunchucks, except there's another section to it. It's a Chinese martial arts weapon. And
it's 150% of nunchucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Only it's cigar tubes, not
exactly.
nunchucks.
And then but like in the right hands, it's like one of the most devastating weapons. But as like a budding kung fu student like I was, I'm like, I really want to try that. And you pick it up in the first time, and like simultaneously, you can crack yourself in the skull and hit yourself in the nuts at the same time. And you're like, wow, that really
That's
hurt.
encryption. That's
That like really hurts.
Because
and I'm like on the ground. I just need to cry like a little girl for a little while, and then take some instruction to learn how to use this weapon first. That's pretty much encryption.
Paul, because
you can't use those when you're sitting on the toilet.
Because not everybody's into kung fu. The analogy that I use is similar to what you're saying, that I've used often over the years with customers is, and it's true for any security technology, any technology for that matter. I can give you a set of paintbrushes. I can give you a palette with a whole bunch of paint on it, all the different colors you want, and I can give you an easel. You have all the tools to paint a masterpiece, so go do it. Are you able to do it?
No, I draw stick figures. They're awesome.
Yeah, so there's something to be said for skill and technique and talent when it comes to the application of any tools.
But those things take work.
Tools.
That's work. Yes.
Some tools are a little bit more, we'll call them user-friendly than others. PGP especially is a bit more like a straight razor. Yes,
user-friendly and a segue to PGP wasn't working for me.
With a straight razor, it will give you a beautiful, close shave. It will do exactly what you tell it to do. And if your hand slips at all, there goes your nose.
Yep.
If you're shaving your nose, you've got a really significant hair problem.
Yeah, like why are you shaving your nose?
Mustache.
For Paul, it's more like there go your nuts, because he's into that Brazilian.
Got to keep it tight.
I wonder if that weight metric gets picked up by the toilet seat.
Oh, please, Paul, end it now.
My toilet seat scale has to be very accurate, Scott, okay? I want accuracy.
His toilet seat needs to do the shaving while he's sitting there. That's efficient.
We're very much about science in my household, okay? I got one of these surface temperature gauges. It's like a little laser gun, right? And you point it at something.
Infrared thermometer.
Yeah, infrared thermometer. That thing is freaking awesome, dude. Like, I can point it at, like, walls and all kinds of stuff, and I know the surface temperature. I'm like, that is so cool. My 3-year-old has it. Dude, he's measuring surface temperature on everything. He's like, what's the surface temperature of the baby? What's the surface temperature of the window? Like, he measures the whole house. Like, we're a budding scientist in the house. It's great.
I admit it, you measured the temperature of your nuts. Come on.
Of course. I mean, why wouldn't you?
I know a guy who used one of those in conjunction with a blowtorch to do solder reflow.
Yeah. Yes, it's science. Science is awesome. Well, I want to thank our illustrious panel for coming on this show. Josh, Joff, Jeff, and Eric on via Skype.
And Scott.
Hey, sorry, I knew I was missing someone in there. I thought I missed Josh, but I said Josh.
You were getting all
the J names. Got the J names, Scott and Eric. Thank you very much for participating in this episode of Paul Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And like cigar tubes and toilet seats, and we ran the gamut of topics here on this show. Happy holidays to everyone. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see everyone in 2017. Over.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And out.